Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're with us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're at in the country. We're going to give just a couple minutes for folks to usher in from the waiting room, and then we will get started. And while we do that, as you come in, I'm going to share a little poll. I would love to get a little bit of perspective on the types of roles that each of you have in your organizations as we talk through things about comprehensive campaigns today. So that poll will be popping up here for you as you come in. We'll give just another minute here and then we'll get started. All right. Well, welcome. Excited to have you all joining us this afternoon as we talk about comprehensive campaigns and the opportunity that they represent to maximize fundraising results for nonprofits of all types in the fundraising market right now. I'm thrilled to see we've got a great representation of key executive leaders and development staff on the call this afternoon. That'll help me, and I see one board member as well. So that'll help me speak very pointedly towards aspects that are going to be most relevant for each of you. My hope is that this will be an incredibly beneficial webinar, thought-provoking. As we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. I am Brian Abernathy. I'm the general manager for Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. We're a consulting firm headquartered in Atlanta, but we work nationally. And our primary work is feasibility studies and major funding campaigns, primarily capital and comprehensive campaigns, though we have done some and do endowment-specific campaigns also. What we really have seen in the market recently is a huge opportunity for nonprofits to move towards this comprehensive funding approach. We get a number of consistent questions when we are moving into capital campaigns. Things like how do we raise capital and not cannibalize our annual fund? Or we just went out and did a big endowment push. Is it bad timing to go back and make a significant capital request, right? So there are numerous different avenues of fundraising that are going on in a nonprofit over the course of a year. When you think about capital, it expands even more. And when you look to multi-year funding, so what do we do to align those? Particularly today, there are two factors that I think are good reference points as we start this conversation. The first is the labor market. We hear from clients all over the country. It is difficult to find and retain development personnel. There's a lot of labor constriction, but when it comes to fundraising specific roles and getting that experience, a comprehensive campaign is going to give you an efficiency factor. You'll see how that'll play out as we speak and talk through the presentation today. The second one is planned giving and thinking towards long-term sustainability. A couple of weeks ago, we did a webinar, and you can see this on our website, talking about trends in giving from baby boomers all the way down to Gen Z. There is an estimated 85 to 90 trillion dollars that's going to change hands from baby boomers and the quiet generation down to millennials and Gen X specifically. So most of the major gifts funding based on research that's coming into nonprofits is from baby boomers. So they're moving into a place where their capacity to have transformational impact on your nonprofits is shifting from an income-based giving to an estate and asset-based giving. And so shifting and being ready for that while also thinking about building your next wave of major gift funders is going to be critical for sustainability for pretty much every nonprofit. And the comprehensive campaign approach takes all of those facets into consideration and helps you move towards that long-term picture while building so that your near-term sustainability, that operating cash flow, is not jeopardized. I want to share briefly as we step into this how we approach fundraising at Convergent. We view fundraising in every avenue through the lens of what we call asking rights, which, as you can see, is the right to ask for big dollars. And there's three facets to this. Number one is credibility. This is a simple dynamic. This is your influence of your board members, of your staff, your brand, right? What is the brand identity? I know we've got some Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs on the webinar today. That Y brand, the Boys and Girls Club brand, it is clearly identifiable. Everyone knows it. They trust it. Then there's the outcomes piece. These are the net results of the work that your nonprofit is doing that is moving the needle on various things in your community. And we're going to talk through some examples of that later on as well. Really, what we're going to talk mostly about today falls under fundraising skill. A comprehensive campaign is a fundraising skill or tactic that historically large universities, large hospitals have used for years and years and years. The billion-dollar campaign for the state university is not raising all of their money through annual gifts. They're not raising it all through capital. They are maximizing pathways for engagement with their donors to raise as much as possible through whatever avenue those donors are able or willing to contribute. That's what we want to bring into play and make accessible or achievable for the run-of-the-mill everyday nonprofit organization, right? So as we think about all of this, really what we're looking at is the ability to deliver outcomes that are valuable to investors or the donors who are funding your nonprofit. So we're going to start to talk about different campaigns. I mentioned we've got some Ys, some Boys and Girls Clubs on today. I know we've got quite a few education institutions also. Please throw any questions you've got into the Q&A. We're going to have some time to talk through those as we wrap up. And also, please know that we will be emailing out both a link to the recording of the webinar and the slides, so everyone will get access to those automatically. So I look forward to hearing any questions y'all have. And as we jump into talking about different types of campaigns, I'd love to hear from you on this poll that's popping up. How would you describe your fundraising process? Is it scattered, organized but siloed, or streamlined? So almost every nonprofit organization is going to have multiple different types of campaigns that will be going on over the course of the year, even if they're not particularly thinking about them in the mindset of different campaigns. So you see a handful of them on the screen here. The year-end giving campaign is a great one. I love when folks have a really strong year-end strategy because there's so much opportunity there as the year kicks down and the ball is dropping in New York to rake in some last-minute gifts. A year-end campaign needs to start in August or September to be most effective. There's a long run of communication and engagement that sets the tone for the best results there. Similarly, you can look at a capital campaign. That's generally not something someone is just going to jump into with a small amount of planning. Typically, there's some very clear plans, cost assessments, feasibility study. Then you've got something like an endowment campaign where everything all the way down to your measure of success might look very different than most of these other campaigns. And even if your nonprofit has two or three or four of these going on independently over the course of any given year, the opportunity for confusion or that siloed or scattered approach based on what we're seeing in these poll options is very, very easy. And when we think about these, everyone wants to maximize what they can raise out of the campaigns that they are navigating. So clear majority of folks on the call recognize, hey, our fundraising process is scattered or organized but siloed. You can be very effective in each of these individually and still not be maximizing your opportunity through the best alignment. So, what is the worst? I'm sorry, what is the goal, the objective of every campaign? It is to maximize funding, whether it's that annual campaign, whether it's a board match campaign. You want to raise every dollar you can through every single campaign, every appeal, every communication point that you put out there. You want to be driving revenue to the organization so that you can maximize impact that is motivating donors and drawing folks into your organization. So we flip that on its head. What is the biggest obstacle that all campaigns share? It is time and fatigue. And we think about three, four, five, maybe even more different standalone campaigns are opportunity for time and fatigue to wear down our success only grow with every next layer of appeal and engagement we add. This fatigue can be staff fatigue. Maybe you've got a limited team. Maybe your marketing team is trying to juggle the timing of when to roll out which message for which campaign at what point in the year. Board members who are fatiguing over the updates and the status and the drawing on of campaigns that have not reached that goal. And then, of course, one of the worst out there is donor fatigue. The last thing any of us want is for our donors to be growing weary of hearing about what we're doing and our need for funding. We want them to be engaged. We want them to be excited, not worn down and tired from that message. So standalone campaigns have a lot of similarities and a lot of potential that we want to think through how there's some value, but also how they create some hurdles. Number one, they're very simple to execute. If we just want to go out and do the world's best year-end giving campaign, we're going to sit down in July, we're going to map out a pathway. And if we have nothing to think about but those structured and strategic points of communication and appeal through the rest of the year, how do we leverage Giving Tuesday? How do we get in on that last minute push at year end? Singular message, very easy to sit out and build that out when we have nothing else to consider. And then you've got that on autopilot for years to come. Every team member knows how they're going to be involved. And generally, those are unrestricted dollars. Right now, we get some other funding avenues where we might have special programs. We might have new capital funds. You're going to get some restricted dollars. And you start to come into this place as you layer multiple standalone campaigns where you've got to really think strategically and thread the needle in some cases of how you would make an ask in one place that's not going to cannibalize another campaign. So what is a comprehensive campaign? How does it address all of those different pathways? Very simply put, a comprehensive campaign is just aligning multiple campaigns under a cohesive strategy, message, timeline, and appeal. This could be a year-end giving campaign with the public phase of a capital campaign and rolling into a new year with an annual campaign. There's not a right or wrong set of different campaigns or funding priorities that would be pulled in. Now, I will note that typically there is one or two specific definitively larger needs. So seeding or growing an endowment, a new program startup in a neighboring community, a capital need. Most of the time, one of those larger mindset funding priorities is going to play in. Otherwise, you're really just talking about different facets of annual appeals. You've noted I haven't mentioned events and grants. Those are their own unique other sort of pathway. That there's some avenues to play into this, but from a functional standpoint, we're really talking about direct appeal here. So, how does the comprehensive campaign approach change things for a nonprofit organization? Here's the difference. A comprehensive campaign is going to give you cohesion, it's going to give you focus. You're going to have one message. It's almost always critical that this is a multi-year message because we want to minimize that fatigue of repeated asks. So, a lot of times, this is going to be what some of you may have heard called a one ask. We're going to go to a funder and we're going to talk about operating. We're going to talk about new program. We might talk about capital or endowment, but we're going to have one big picture conversation. Stepping back on those individual touch points, there's going to need to be much more intentional alignment of appeals. We're going to talk a little bit about capacity evaluation, making the right ask, and not just the dollar amount, but the right type of giving avenue with each prospect. That's critical to maximizing revenue. And then knowing that every team member is going to have a distinct role, every volunteer or board member, we want their involvement, but we don't want to fatigue them, right? We want to think through what is the highest and best spot for our board members to be engaged. What's the best use of their time, their influence, the value that they bring to our credibility to be leveraged for our fundraising success. The other very unique dynamic around a comprehensive campaign versus disparate siloed campaigns is the idea of a branded appeal that sets up for a one ask approach. So let me explain really quickly what that means. We're not going to go to a funder in a comprehensive campaign and say, we just want you to fund this program with these specific outputs, or we just want you to fund this building. Don't worry about keeping the lights on, the operations, the deferred maintenance through maybe an endowment. Now, we're going to talk about overarching vision over the next 5 years. We're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. We're going to launch this new program in a neighboring community. We're going to build the building. We're going to engage our target community, and we're going to achieve these outcomes. These are the results that we want to get. And to achieve that, we need $10 million. And we're asking that funder to fund toward that overall multi-year vision and objective, not to fund capital, not to fund operating. So many of you have probably heard this question or comment from funders in the past. Is this funding operating, right? We don't really want to fund operating. I don't quite understand where this trend came from because if a nonprofit can't fund their operating, their impact is going to be non-existent. But there are a lot of funders out there that want to think about how they're funding impact. And for some reason, there's a disconnect between impact and operating. The comprehensive and branded campaign message here allows us to convey, here's what we're achieving. And we're asking you to fund the results and the impact we're going to have. Yes, we're going to have to operate the organization. We're going to have to pay staff. We're going to have to keep the lights on. We're going to have to build a building. We'd really love to grow an endowment so that we can maintain this program of work long-term into the future and honor your commitment to our nonprofit with that legacy impact. All of that under the Do It Better campaign brand and a pledge to that Do It Better campaign creates a broader pathway for unrestricted use of funds. Not an accountant, not a lawyer, so please consult with your professionals on that, of course. But by and large, in the campaigns that Convergent is managing, we see this increased flexibility because funders are not thinking about the work that's going on in the same way that they are when you're talking about an annual operating appeal. They're thinking about the impact that will be achieved. So huge, huge value proposition there. How do we unpack that? We love to go back to what's called the motivational pyramid. This is not proprietary by any means to Convergent, K Sprinkle Grace. developed this many years ago. We use it because we think it is the best visual understanding of how to expand capacity and tap into capacity from a pool of potential funders. So you'll see the bottom level of this pyramid is capacity, right? This is what a funder will give from income or wealth typically. A planned gift from an estate is a wealth gift. A recurring $50 a month contribution is an income gift, right? So we understand those differences there. We move up to concern and we see there's either a light or heavy concern. Does the funder care deeply about the work that you are doing, or is it a peripheral point of connection coming out? Or, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use connection. That's the next layer. Peripheral point of awareness and passion for the work that you're doing. Interestingly, coming out of the pandemic in 2021, we saw a significant amount of funding going to organizations that had a very high degree of concern among their funders. Funders who saw an organization they believed was critical in the work that they were doing did not have any hiccups in getting out and writing that check and funding their work because everyone was acutely mindful of the value that different nonprofits were delivering in the community and what would happen if it went away. So concern is very important. And then there's connection. I can have great capacity, be incredibly wealthy, have a very, very high degree of concern for a cause. And if I don't have any connection to how a nonprofit is changing that, maybe it's a relational connection. Maybe I just know someone or have a personal friend or family member who's been impacted by it, or there's rational connection of I can see the linear data-driven mindset for how this nonprofit is moving the needle on the cause that I care about. It's going to help me feel compelled to donate or invest more to achieve that outcome. So unlike some pyramids where you want to move up the pyramid, what we really want to do is deepen connection across every level of the pyramid. If we take capacity, plug into concern, and then move into a connection of how our nonprofits are moving the needle on the area of concern, that helps us unlock the capacity. And when we walk through each of these phases, we're going to unpack more funding opportunity from the same pool of funders. So we're working with a client right now at Convergent where we've been using this vernacular around comprehensive campaign, moving them out of an annual and sort of restricted funding mindset to talk about fundable opportunities. Now, we want to change the dynamic in a given area over the course of the next handful of years. We're not asking you to fund this program. We're asking you to help us change that reality. And right now, it could be a definitive program, but 24 months from now or 3 years from now, we might need to do something completely different based on what changes in the market that's going to help us achieve the outcome that you're funding us to achieve. So this is a little bit of a paradigm shift on how we message and convey not what our nonprofits are doing, not the activity we're undertaking, and really not even the outputs that we're producing, but the outcomes, the long-term results that will be achieved. And so as we look at this, the messaging, the mindset of the funders and how we would structure a comprehensive campaign, we have to look at the structure of what goes into it. So number one, comprehensive campaign is almost always going to be multi-year. Usually we see 3 to 5 year projects at Convergent. Larger institutional nonprofits, the large 4-year universities, hospitals, you'll see a lot of 10, maybe even 15-year campaigns. And when we get into behemoth level of funding campaigns, billion-dollar projects over multi-years, you may see 15 or 20-year objectives. By and large, for the average nonprofit, 3 to 5 years is going to be very, very functional. And you're going to want to look at what are our potential capital needs? What do we need to do to grow our endowment? Or what does it take to start an endowment? There is so much opportunity over the next couple of decades for nonprofits to receive really game-changing amounts of funding through planned giving and estate giving. If you don't have an endowment today, it is the time to start thinking about one. Just Very, very important to start moving down that pathway. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward, but endowment is a huge opportunity. Maybe there's program or special projects for a lot of community colleges that we work with. We see not just scholarship, but also student success and sustainability needs. Now, how are we addressing all the non-scholarship cost hurdles that might be keeping a student from enrolling or degree completion, right? It could be childcare, it could be any number of things, transportation. Special project could be growing into a neighboring community. And then, of course, we've mentioned that always their annual or operating fund, right? So you want to think through from a multi-year strategic plan structure how you would need each of these areas to grow, what fundraising objectives you have, and what you would need to see over the 3 to 5 years in each of these. So maybe you've got a $5 million capital project. You think there's going to be about $100,000 a year in new program startup to move into a neighboring community. And then your annual operating is, we'll do it really round and easy, $500,000 a year. So $5 million capital, $500,000 for special needs, $500,000 for operating each year. We are looking at, if I can do math, roughly a $7.5 million comprehensive campaign structure versus multiple different pathways, multiple different sets of prospect engagement, communication strategies, appeals, and so forth. You're able to align those and go out and engage under a cohesive message and a cohesive appeal. A couple of things to think about as you look towards structuring a comprehensive campaign. You've got to have a more robust case. It cannot be we want to keep doing the same thing we're doing for the next 5 years. You're not going to get your funders in most cases to level up significantly or make multi-year commitments if you're just asking them to keep things where they are. If you're funding where you're at right now and you don't see significant areas of growth, a comprehensive campaign may not be the path to pursue. A clarified organizational value proposition. We've talked about how important it is in a comprehensive campaign. We shift funder perspective towards funding the results, not so much the work. They still got to pay for the work, but we want them thinking about the results. We'll give some more clarity on this in just a moment. Then there's strategic prospect evaluation. This is absolutely crucial in a comprehensive campaign. You're going to want to know where your real endowment prospects are. You're going to want to know where your near-term cash opportunity for capital needs lies. You're going to want to understand how you might move someone from sporadic, lower level annual gifts into a more meaningful major gifts role through the comprehensive campaign appeal. So there's a whole lot more analysis and review of prospects that should take place in a comprehensive campaign than any other individual singular campaign focus. Of course, there's also a crucial role for cultivation. If you've got someone who is in a history as a donor of being approached 2, 3, 4 times a year for different funding avenues, you probably don't want to miss the first three spots on the calendar that they're used to getting appeal and just show up on the fourth. They might have decided that they think you don't need them anymore and they've started to give elsewhere. So communicating, cultivating those key funders earlier on so they understand what's going on. And then that also sets up the value of very intentional ordered solicitations and appropriate milestones. There are lots of degrees of nuance we can go into on this that would be highly specific towards different types of organizations. So we're not going to go too far down that pathway, but these steps are critical so that your comprehensive campaign can be not just effective, but efficient. Remember, we want to stay away from that fatigue mindset. So the more efficient we are, not just in our internal staff practices, but also with external engagement and volunteer and board engagement, we're going to be more effective based on the value of that efficiency and not wearing down people at any level. So I mentioned organizational value proposition. This is a great summary. This comes from a Boys and Girls Club. But the idea here is the dollars created due to catalyzing a positive outcome. And I have to point out that we don't want to overshadow the value of emotional connection and the fact that many funders are going to be giving to your nonprofits because of people, maybe because of the impact on their life or a family member's. So we don't want to err towards exclusively looking at this data-driven mindset for appeals and clarifying our organization's value, but we want to have it there because in many cases it's going to upgrade the lens through which funders look at how much they might give. So for this particular Boys and Girls Club, one of the key outcomes in their community, outputs in their community would have been X number of people, forgive me, graduating high school. In this case, it was just under 11,000. For their community, our team that does these reports was able to model out the average additional annual earnings of just under, again, 11,000. So that means nearly $1.5 billion in working lifetime earnings additional coming into the lives of those alum because they finished high school. Now, that has significant ripple effects that play down through the community. They're more likely to buy a car, to finance that car with the local bank, to take it into the local auto dealer and get the oil change. They're probably also more likely to be an auto tech and have a job in that auto dealer who might be tight for workforce, right? So what we're doing is connecting funders in the community to understand the value that your nonprofit is creating that they are the beneficiaries of. This plays in so many different markets and changes mindset. Right now, for community technical colleges, the workforce crunch, connecting these gaps is game changing. Similarly, for YMCAs, and again, I'm speaking to some of the audience I know we've got on the call, the value that Ys and Boys and Girls Clubs bring from a childcare standpoint to be able to keep workers in the jobs that their employers are very interested in them filling and continuing to work, right? So we want to think through these. We worked in a community and we're actually able to quantify the cost savings of emergency services and other things for a YMCA teaching swim lessons to everyone in their community, every third grader, I think it was, in their community. Don't quote me on that, even though this is in video on the internet forever. The key there is there's value that many did not recognize from the service that YMCA was delivering. When we show that value, it changes the way a potential funder thinks about why they should give and how much they should give. I've also got to throw the caveat here. These are all very unique to each individual organization and community. So we don't want to jump to too many conclusions in terms of the numbers we see on the screen or the examples I gave. But I can tell you that this changes the way funders think about how much they're going to give. So aside from that, how does the comprehensive campaign maximize funding? A couple of different things here. We go back to that capacity level of the donor pyramid that we looked at. Cash flow versus wealth and asset giving. If we've got a core funder who's always given towards our annual fund, they're a big major gift supporter, they love us, and they're moving into fixed income. They're moving out of their working career. Their capacity for major gifts on an annual basis may very well be diminishing. So helping them know how they can transition their love for your nonprofit and their support into a legacy mindset through planned giving helps them stay connected. It could also give you an opportunity to talk with them about their children or grandchildren or next generation running the business to help them step in to have a similar role in supporting the organization and become potentially your next wave of major gifts funders. There's also foundations and corporate budgets. There are some foundations that are going to want to give to capital. There are others who will absolutely not fund capital. Similarly with corporate budgets, if we can navigate some of these outcomes, we might be able to move from a community relations budget that might have distinct limitations into an HR or workforce budget, right? If we're providing childcare value that keeps their workers in jobs that they want to stay filled, you might be able to step into a different budget and unlock some different capacity. Additionally, we talked about flexibility and allocation. There will always be some funders, even in a comprehensive campaign, who say, hey, we really just want to write a check and we want you to earmark it, right? We've all heard that word a ton. We want you to earmark it towards the building, or we want you to earmark it towards the program that's right in our backyard versus the other side of the metro area. That's always going to happen to some degree. It's generally a smaller ratio of the funders and the dollars. And beyond that, you get great flexibility in how you would leverage the funds you're raising to execute the overarching multi-year vision. It also, this is one of my favorite sort of freebies, if you will, on a comprehensive campaign. It raises the bar on what folks see your organization doing. You're able to communicate a multi-year, a more compelling vision of what you're going to accomplish and the value it's going to bring. And then lastly, there's a lot of support out there to show that this is going to increase your future annual funding. So what do I mean by that? If I'm giving $50 to a nonprofit once a year, and they come to me and they say, "Hey, Brian, you've been supporting us for 5 years. We love your partnership. It helps us do X, Y, and Z. Over the next 5 years, we're trying to go from a level A to level C." Maybe I should have reversed those. Level C up to level A, right? We want to improve and expand what we're doing. Rather than that $50 a year, would you write us a check for $150 a year? And you can add zeros on this all day long. And I think the principle carries a lot of relevance. 5 years from now, if I've written that $150 check every year and they've delivered on communicating to me the value of that dollar and what it's driven for their impact in the community, I'm more than likely not going to go back to $50 a year 5 years down the road, right? More than likely, my capacity has grown over time. My connection and concern for this organization has deepened because I've been stewarded well. I haven't just been hit with appeals. I made a commitment over multiple years. I fulfilled that commitment, and I've been shown the value that it's bringing, the lives that it's changing. I'm going to want to make that continue. And more than likely, I'm going to continue at that level or somewhere near it, not my historically lower level. So there's some very interesting opportunity that comes into that. What if you have missing elements, right? We don't need a building. Do you have capital upgrades that might take place? Do you have unnamed aspects of your community, of your facility that you might want to put a name on, right? So there's all kinds of ways that we don't have to have a new building to have capital expense. So keep that in mind. We don't have an endowment. I already clarified that the opportunity for endowment is huge. I would say if you don't have one, go ahead and make an appointment on your calendar for tomorrow to start thinking through how to set the tone for communicating planned giving, because the opportunity is absolutely here in front of us today. And those who are taking advantage of it and communicating to that are going to get the benefit of it. And then what if we don't have new programs or projects? A lot of times, there are some simple shifts in paradigm of how we communicate what might be going on today in your nonprofit that would shift perspective of a lot of funders who maybe are just not as aware of the value current programs are giving. So communication becomes a huge, huge aspect of this. There's some great moral victories that come out of a comprehensive campaign before we jump into a few examples. Number one, you get to make fewer asks. Personally, I love making a direct solicitation. That's one of my favorite things about having had the opportunity to run so many capital campaigns in my life. But for a lot of us, there's a lot of fatigue on our staff of having to go out and feeling like we're constantly asking. And for a lot of donors, they feel like they're constantly being asked. With the comprehensive campaign, you're going to make one direct ask over a handful of years, and then you're going to steward. You're going to value and appreciate that funder. You're going to bring them in for a ribbon cutting. You're going to send them an email with a picture of a beneficiary of programming whose lives been impacted. You're going to grow in your relationship and connectivity with your funders through this opportunity to communicate long-term impact. You're going to get a bigger banner to wave. I mentioned before that made up example campaign, 5 million in capital, 500,000 a year for new program, 500,000 a year for operating. Well, let's just say that $10 million campaign. I said 7.5 before. My math is getting better as we go on. Let's just say the average campaign in that community is $4 to $5 million. That's what most funders are used to seeing. That's right where that standalone capital project would have been, right? So it's just another $5 million campaign. When you roll in the 500,000 a year for new program, the 500,000 a year for operating, you've just set a $10 million campaign objective. And a lot of that is what you might consider sort of installed recurring revenue with your annual fund. You want to level that up and certainly look to grow in that. But let's just say you come out and you raise 11.2 million dollars. You have set a new perspective for how your nonprofit is going to be seen amongst the community and particularly amongst the funding community. They're used to $5 million campaigns all day long. It's not any big deal. And then you come out and stretch that goal by 100+%. They're going to think differently about the sophistication of how your nonprofit is able to receive and manage funds and probably end up thinking about increasing how they're giving based on that overarching picture of total funding. And I'm going to share a specific example of that here in just a moment from the past. There's also the efficiency of staff time and the fiscal sustainability piece, right? None of us like the idea of every year knowing that we've got to chase that diminishing revenue as expenses are staying steady over the course of the fiscal year. Multi-year commitments give you, as key leaders in your nonprofit, board members, staff, whatever it may be, the opportunity to have clearer projection and know where you might need to cut back or ramp up based on timing of funding. So lots of value there. I want to jump into 3 examples and then we'll have some time for some Q&A just to show you how this approach fits with different organization types, but also different communities. And I tried to tailor these towards some of the participants we've got today. A rural Boys and Girls Club that we worked with. This is a town of about 30,000. And they needed to outfit a new facility. They needed to fund some endowment. You can see here about $1 million for endowment to provide long-term maintenance coverage for that facility. $250,000 a year for new program. This is over a 5-year picture. I'm sorry, $250,000 total over 5 years for programming, and then $150,000 for fundraising and engagement expenses. That's generally code for paying for counsel because there's a lot of planning and work that goes into these. And so this organization actually exceeded that $3.2 million goal in a relatively small community. They funded their capital, they funded the program stability, and they funded the endowment to care for that building, and they paid for the cost of the fundraising through a comprehensive campaign approach. Proves the point that comprehensive campaigns are not just for highly sophisticated $100+ million organizations. Even the small rural community has nonprofits that can effectively leverage and execute a very transformative comprehensive campaign. I think that campaign spanned about 9 to 10 months, if memory serves. Second example. This is a mid-market YMCA that did not employ a comprehensive campaign. So there were a few projects going on. The one that I was involved in was phase 2 capital of a build out that would have had 3 phases. So trying to get to the $8 million of $12 million mark in that second phase. $3 million being raised through a public-private partnership for a neighboring capital project in a county in the same Y association. And then the other capital project being funded largely through a real estate transaction. At the same time, they were seeding an endowment with about $500,000, so seeking to fund that. And they had an annual campaign ongoing, and their average annual campaign at that point was about $1 million a year. We went to a very, very high capacity foundation that exclusively funds capital projects. And we wanted to make a 7-figure appeal to this foundation. All the right cultivation steps, all the points of engagement, and this capital appeal was going to be for that Capital One, phase 2 of that $12 million project. We went and sat down with the foundation executive, and they said, "Hey, what you're asking us for, we like the idea of it. We even like the idea of funding this specific building on the facility's grounds, but your goal and the threshold of how we assess how much we would contribute don't align." So they were going to give X percentage of the overarching goal. What we wanted them to fund and what they had interest in was beyond that percentage. So if they were going to give 10%, we were asking for 25. Their feedback was, what else is going on? What else are you funding? We want to see your local commitment getting you to the 5-yard line, and then we'll come and run you into the end zone. So tell us what else is going on. We started to walk through these other aspects of fundraising that were ongoing. And they said, great, here's what we want you to do. Rewrite your letter of appeal to the board and clarify an overarching project of which you've got now multiples of that initial goal. And you can show that we want a seven-figure commitment on this bigger picture, 18 to $20 million overall fundraising effort, of which we are almost to the finish line. That shift in perspective to a comprehensive approach, in this case, it was just for that one appeal, ended up securing that gift that was transformational for securing that Capital One project in that phase two. And actually, later on, found out set the organization up to blow through phase three of that capital project. So, perfect example of how high capacity funders are thinking big picture, not project by project. So, huge reason to think about that comprehensive approach there. The last example, this one's actually in process right now, so forgive some of the lack of dollar specifics, but I thought it was a great example, and it is absolute real time. Those other two are a couple of years old. Um, Community college that says we have bond funds for buildings for forever. We can name a ton of rooms in those buildings. We don't need to build anything. So we got an avenue for capital in there, right? We need to fund some scholarship to get students in here. That's generally a pretty familiar pathway of funding for community and even four-year schools. And then there's a student support fund, right? What are those other hurdles? If it's transportation, if it's childcare, whatever the dynamics are, we want to fund that. And then we want to grow our endowment, right? So they're rolling all of those in. Candidly, the capital piece is sort of a back pocket avenue for when someone comes up and says, hey, we want to fund capital, we'll have some naming opportunities available. But the rest of this is we want to grow the endowment, and we want to make sure there's no barrier to a student completing their degree attainment so that they can go out into the community, increase their economic potential, and also provide value as part of the local workforce. So plenty of different avenues that you can apply this comprehensive approach across different nonprofit contexts. So would love to get some Q&A out of the way here. Please feel free to jump into that Q&A window and throw any questions you've got into the picture. A couple of them here. One, we don't have an endowment yet. How would we get started? We haven't thought about this opportunity. The first thing I would recommend you lean towards if you're new into the endowment space, which obviously based on the question you are, look to organizations that can do the majority of the heavy lifting for you. This may be a community foundation or similarly structured kind of umbrella foundation. They're going to be able to give you a lot of the fiduciary and legal expertise that's really just on tap when you need it. In a lot of cases, they can facilitate gift management. They're going to have an advisors group, legal and accounting advisors. And then the first thing you do to start securing endowment and planned giving is just let your funders know that it's out there. We ask this question in almost every feasibility study we do. Would you be interested in knowing more about how to make planned or non-traditional gifts for the nonprofit that you already care about and love? Most of the time, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Then all you need to do is communicate and follow up. That question can go on all of your direct engagement and response opportunities with your funders. Let's see what else we've got here. We don't have a multi-year strategic plan. How important is a multi-year strategic plan for a comprehensive campaign? It's generally very important as a starting point. And here's what I would say. You may have a general perspective that's not fully built out if you just get your staff around the table and start to think through what do you need? What would you do more of if you were able to secure additional resources? That strategy will start to guide itself. Then there's also a lot of value if you're thinking about a building project, bringing in someone who does market research to assess what would the utility of this building be. We're going to be sharing some follow-up resources that'll include access to a podcast that'll directly talk about planning and market study to know that you're not going to build something that's going to sit unutilized, helps you communicate the importance to your funders. So a multi-year plan is very important. Doesn't have to be perfect, Doesn't have to be fleshed out to the degree that we know in quarter 3 of year 4, we're going to turn on the lights in this new room and hire this new staff. Everything changes over time. We want a high level, directionally correct strategy that can be taken out to funders. So great, great question there. We've got another one here. Small community with several nonprofits asking donors for money. What's the strategy? So interestingly, that small market Boys and Girls Club that I mentioned, town of about 30,000, Convergent was managing 2 projects in the same community at the same time, and they both exceeded their goals. So I'm going to go back here to 2 things. Number one is we've got to be very mindful of that donor fatigue. If the same funders in a community are getting hit at the same time from multiple different angles, and there's not a long history of connection and affinity to organizations, it's possible that they might start just thinking, hey, let's take this little chunk of money and slice it up, right? We want them to think transformationally. So relationship with the funder is critical. We need to be mindful of how fatigue may play in. I'll also plug here, this is a huge value of a feasibility study. In a feasibility study, we're going and sitting down, closing the door, and getting candid perspective from those top level funders to let them say how they're planning to assess the fact that there may be different communities going on. The other thing I would point out is the critical role that your organizational value proposition and how you communicate it comes to play in this situation. If there are multiple organizations with appeals before the same funder, and one of those organizations is able to more clearly communicate in a measurable way how they're moving the needle on something that matters to that funder. I've not surveyed funders, so this is somewhat anecdotal, but I can tell you from our experience in campaigns, they're going to fund what is showing results in the direction that they're drawn, right? So is there affinity, the thing that they care about in that concern level of the investor pyramid we looked at? Is that concern being met, and which organization is doing it well? A lot of times you'll have different campaigns from different sectors, maybe a housing and human services, maybe something from a workforce community college standpoint. So oftentimes when you've got different lanes of service, you won't run into as much of butting up against one another in appeals because the value proposition is so unique and different from one organization to the next. That's a great question and always something that's got to be kept in mind in smaller markets. Let's see what else we've got out there. Funder evaluation. So how do we assess who makes a good endowment prospect? So endowment funding is measured inherently different typically when we're thinking about planned giving. There's obviously cash inflow to endowment that would come in as well. But if we want to think about prospects for planned giving, there are different triggers. One of the things that we use in the client relationships that we have is just wealth analytics and looking at screening and reviewing one of the platforms that we subscribe to. And I'm not going to mention what it is because I don't remember if I've got the right name for it, but I'm sure you can find all these online. It's going to give us a likely to bequest score. That's not a perfect indicator, but it is an indicator that we can build from. Relationship is key here, right? If you've got long-term major gifts funders who are moving towards the end of their working life or maybe into their later years altogether, it's an easy thing. It feels a little bit uncomfortable when you think about asking someone about their estate, but to go to them and say, we value your commitment. How can we honor your legacy and the work that we've been able to do because of your generosity through the organization? That opens up a door to so much. This is leaning towards what a lot of folks talk about as donor-centric philanthropy these days, of really looking at what do we help you accomplish with your plans in the end of your life that also aligns with your love for our nonprofit. So a couple of great ways to maybe navigate assessing those endowment prospects. And as I noted before too, just making it known that planned gifts, non-traditional stock transfer, whatever it may be, real estate, that you're open to those types of gifts. A lot of time, the folks that have the wealth in those areas that they need to think about planning it are already thinking that way. Their advisors, their financial advisors, their accountants, and others, they're pressing them to have answers to those questions. for a lot of nonprofits, I think just being in the conversation opens the door that delivers a lot of opportunity. So, well, this is great. I think we're right at our time here. We'll give just a second for any other questions maybe that may be lingering out there. As I noted, we're going to email out a link to view the recording as well as a copy of the slides. And then some follow-up information on some other resources. Convergent has done a series of content around comprehensive campaigns this year, how to walk through planning, assessment, is it right for us? And of course, if you've got any questions, anything that we can answer around how this might fit for your nonprofit, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us online at convergentnonprofit.com. Really grateful for everyone joining this afternoon. Hope everyone has a lovely day.